The White House has sent resources to Arizona. President Trump has called Savannah Guthrie. He even watched today's law enforcement update. The nation is nervously awaiting any word on the whereabouts of Savannah's 84-year-old mother, Nancy. Did you see the Wall Street Journal story earlier this week about the spy sheikh, $500 million to the Trump crypto company, and how that may have paved the way to sales of advanced AI chips? One of the reporters who broke that story joins us with the mind-blowing details. Will you be betting on the Super Bowl this Sunday? Several of us will. Here's our grid, in fact. Christie, who helped expand online betting, has a warning. Beware of prediction markets. He'll tell us why. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. On our menu tonight, I don't use that menu reference very often, but we're always experimenting here. We may go back to it. The menu. The White House on Iran, nuclear weapons in Russia, ICE agents around voting precincts, and the president's direct personal involvement in the search for Nancy Guthrie, mother of NBC Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie. We'll also take a closer look at potential U.S. military confrontation with Iran, a prisoner swap between Ukraine and Russia that might suggest negotiations to end that long-running war are gaining momentum, though, as we should acknowledge, we have been fooled on that front before. We also have an interview with the Polish foreign minister on Russia's war on Ukraine and, interestingly, the Epstein files. Also, former New Jersey Governor Christie, to whom, if you love online betting, you should send a fruit basket or some sort of gift, joins us to give props? See what I did there? To online betting around the Super Bowl and probably the Olympics. But he will warn you against prediction markets like Polymarket and Kalshi. We also have brand new CBS News polling on President Trump's economy. Anthony Salvanto will be here with the semi-dramatic reveal. And a story that positively stunned me, the tale of a sheikh from the United Arab Emirates, a massive pre-inauguration investment in Trump's crypto company, and what that might have had to do with sped-up U.S. approval of AI chip sales. We dig into all of the details with one of the reporters who broke that story. We begin tonight with Weijia Jiang at the White House. Weijia, a lot of things to talk about, but I know you were particularly interested in ICE patrols in Minneapolis, what the president told NBC News about it, and conversations with the White House today about whether ICE agents will in the future be patrolling voting precincts. What do we know?
Well, Major, the reason why the president's remarks in a new NBC News interview were so fascinating is because, as you very well know, having covered this president yourself, he rarely walks anything back. He rarely ever admits wrongdoing, not only for himself, but certainly for members of his administration and cabinet members who he installed. And during that interview, he was asked about the ICE raids and about the 2 Americans who were killed during them. And here's what he said. I want to have our viewers listen to that first before we talk about what he said this morning. Here.
I'm not happy with what happened there. Nobody could be happy, and ICE wasn't happy either. But I'm going to always be with our great people of law enforcement. ICE, police, we have to back them.
So the question he was asked was whether those 2 killings were justified, and he said no, they should not have happened. But this morning, during an annual prayer breakfast with members of Congress, the president fiercely defended DHS Secretary Christie Noem. He said he was aware that people were calling for her firing, but that he was not going to do that because she has been so strong on the border, because crime is down. So he is staunchly defending her, despite acknowledging that there were some missteps in Minnesota. In fact, Major, he said that perhaps they need to take a softer approach in those ICE raids, which, again, is not typical for this president to admit.
As far as ICE and voting precincts, Steve Bannon, who is a well-known podcaster, a sometime influencer on this White House, said there's going to be them around voting precincts. The White House press secretary addressed that at least in part today.
That's right, Major. And as you well know, Steve Bannon was once a very close advisor to President Trump, but now he focuses on his podcast. And even though he, would argue that he has influence, at least that's how he speaks about his ideas on his shows, we are told through sources here that, does not have access to that inner circle, especially when it comes to policy. And you're right, Bannon said that he predicted there would be ICE agents at the polls in November. But today, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, made clear that that is something that she has never heard the president formally talk about. Now, the reporter who asked the question then said, can you guarantee that there will not be ICE agents then at the polls during the midterm elections? And Caroline Leavitt brushed that off as a ridiculous question, saying that the premise was not sincere, but she didn't say no, Major.
Weijia Jiang, North Hall of the White House. Thank you so very much. Now to the investigation into the abduction of Today's Show co-host Savannah Guthrie's mother, Nancy. This is a story that has riveted the country all week. In a press conference today, authorities say they believe the 84-year-old, that is to say Nancy, is, quote, still out there, unquote, but they have not identified a suspect or a person of interest. We are now joined by Andres Gutierrez, who is following the latest. What do we know?
Well, at this point, Major, the investigators providing a clear picture as to what had happened the particular night that Nancy Guthrie went missing. They ended up filling some gaps in that timeline, confirming also that the blood that we saw Tuesday afternoon outside her house here is, in fact, belongs to Nancy Guthrie. Authorities also walked through that detailed timeline, being careful not to draw conclusions. Despite the widespread circulation, they made it very clear that there is no suspect or person of interest at this time. Just as important, investigators say that they are still operating under the belief that Nancy could be alive, with every lead being followed with the help from the FBI and neighboring agencies. And so for the time being, they said there is also a $50,000 reward being offered for any information leading to Nancy's safe return home or any information leading to an arrest for whoever. Initially, the local Crime Stoppers hotline out here was offering $2,500. And now the FBI is stepping in and blasting out this new reward money. But they're also going to be blasting out her photo. They're going to be putting billboards here in Tucson and around the region to make sure that her face remains in the public eye for the time being.
This is a very unusual case, Andres. You know that. They acknowledged that at the press conference today. And there was a direct appeal that sometimes comes in cases that bear some relationship to this case. This one is very, very different. It was an appeal for those who may be on the other side of the camera who know where Nancy Guthrie is from law enforcement. Let's listen.
To anyone that may be involved, do the right thing. This is an 84-year-old grandma. This is an 84-year-old grandma that needs vital medication for her well-being. You still have the time to do the right thing before this becomes a much worse scenario for you.
And Andres, there was a 5 o'clock deadline around this supposed or suspected or reported, though not yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, authenticated ransom note. If there's anything you can add on that front, please do.
That investigators are treating this alleged ransom note very seriously. Could be a key piece of evidence once they catch whoever ended up doing this. 3 so far, 2 of them sent to local media outlets here in Tucson, one to the CBS affiliate. Jonathan Vigliotti just finished speaking with the reporter who saw that note, emailed to her, Mary Campbell. A particular note had some details as to what she was wearing the night of the disappearance and some information about the home. The other note was sent to TMZ, and that one talked about a monetary transfer of Bitcoin to be done by 5 o'clock today. They would not be specific as to what time zone that is, presumably because it was sent here to local media outlets in Tucson, 5 o'clock Arizona Standard Time. But they did emphasize that there has been no proof of life and there has been no follow-up communication since they went public. The FBI has also confirmed they did arrest someone connected to a false ransom demand, and they are warning that anyone who is trying to take advantage of the situation, trying to scam the Guthrie family, will be investigated. That arrest being made early this morning.
The last thing local or federal law enforcement need in this case is distractions like that. Andres Gutierrez, I appreciate it very, very much. We turn overseas now, where the U.S. and Iran are set to hold nuclear negotiations tomorrow in Oman. President Trump said yesterday that Iran's supreme leader should, quote, be very worried. CBS News national security contributor Joe Zaks joins me now here at the family table, former Deputy Assistant Director of the CIA. Joe, it's great to have you here. Thanks for being here. As I understand it, you believe that this is, right now, a historical and potentially pivotal moment for U.S. policy toward Iran. Why?
I think that's exactly right, Major, and thank you for having me on the show this afternoon. It is a historical moment because the Iranian regime it's at its weakest point since the revolution in 1979. And this regime that has been responsible for the murder of over 1,000 U.S. citizens is currently in virtually survival mode. They had to repress the demonstrators a few weeks ago by slaughtering them. Reports are between 10 to 40,000, maybe even higher number of demonstrators. A staggering number, and very tragic for the Iranian people. I think that now the president, our president, has the upper hand, and we will see how this plays out, either through negotiations or military action.
And when you say weakness, you mean weakness not only in terms of political turmoil on the streets that they have to repress violently, a weakened economies, very weak by historical standards, and their proxies around the region weaker than they've ever been before.
That's exactly right. I think since October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, Israel has methodically weakened the Iranian proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. The Houthis, we also had a very important role in degrading their capabilities. And one cannot discount the effect that the 12th Day War in June took on the Iranian regime, as well as on its nuclear program.
Al Jazeera reports, and there are a lot of interlocutors in the region. That's a fancy diplomatic term. That means other countries who are interested. That Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt, probably in coordination with the United States, have put together something approximating a framework. This is not a deal, but it's some of the stipulated points. Iran would agree to commit to zero uranium enrichment for 3 years, then very low levels after that. Stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which is precursor to a nuclear weapon, transferred to a third country. That's a pretty standard ask. Iran agrees not to transfer weapons and technologies to its proxies in the region. Iran pledges not to initiate the use of ballistic missiles, though they were moving some into theater just today, according to reports. And there's a U.S.-Iran non-aggression agreement. Does any of that sound within the ballpark? And how do you think, if this is real, it might be received?
Well, I think it's a start, and certainly diplomatic resolution would be preferable to military action. But I think one has to be very careful in taking the Iranians at face value.
Even if they agree to some of these things.
Even if they agree to some of these things, which I think it will be hard for them to do. I think it's not in the Supreme Leader's DNA to agree to these kind of terms. And I think that President Trump sees an opportunity, perhaps, for maximalist terms and for maximum pressure on them. We are in a very strong position as the United States, and it's time to, in my opinion, for us to take firm action with respect to this Iranian regime.
If there's military action initiated by the United States, that could topple the regime, but with lots of unknown consequences.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you'll have opportunities, but there are tremendous risks. On the risk side, the question is who takes over? And there's a good bit of uncertainty with respect to that. One scenario could be that the IRGC, the Praetorian Guard, decides to eliminate the regime in terms of the theocracy, the supreme leader and the mullahs around him, in order to preserve their own economic hold and their own power in the country. They could promise the populace some form of elections down the road and renege on that. Another possibility would be the Crown Prince, the Shah's son, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. What I find is intriguing about him is that he has a plan. He has a 100-day plan, a transformational plan that includes both an economic component, transition to democracy, and a technocratic plan on how to fix some of the significant problems. the question is, what support does he have in the country? And
who would be there to stay to continue that support and not have him face some? I got to go. We're up against the break, but I appreciate it. Joe Zacks will have you back.
Thank you.
Lots
Pleasure
of conversations ahead, I promise you. Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski is warning President Trump not to trust, he's not the first one to do this, not to trust Russia's Vladimir Putin. In an interview with CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis, he addressed negotiations over the war in Ukraine as well as Poland's recently launched investigation into the Jeffrey Epstein files. Here's some of that conversation.
You mentioned the costs that Russia has mounted to date. President Trump made a personal appeal to President Putin to stop bombarding cities like Kyiv, neighboring towns. Russia hasn't done so. They've continued those bombardments. What does that do to the perception of leverage that the American president has over the Russian president?
Well, and not only that, these are war crimes. To deliberately target civilian infrastructure is a war crime. Vladimir Putin is already an indicted war criminal for his stealing and Russifying Ukrainian children. So this is not someone we trust, and is not someone that the U.S. should trust.
Your Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, recently announced that Poland would be investigating whether Jeffrey Epstein had any connections or involvement with Russian intelligence services. What leads your government to suspect that he did?
Well, there are reports in the British press to that effect. There are also, I'm told, I haven't read 3 million pages, of this monster seeking Polish children to recruit for his horrible activities. So, of course, when Polish citizens are either harmed or doing harm, we investigate.
Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister said that Russian intelligence may possess compromising materials against many leaders still active today. Do you know whom he's suggesting there?
Well, honey traps, that's a classic KGB tactics. Mm-hmm. And there seem to have been a lot of horrible compromise being produced. Mm-hmm. So, yes, it requires investigation.
Olivia Gazis joins me now. Olivia, lots of what the foreign minister said about Russia, Ukraine has been said before. What was most interesting and jumped off that interview sheet for me was what he talked to you about with Epstein. Not only are they launching an investigation, but they think there's real things possibly still going on.
Absolutely. And we were speaking about this just a day after Prime Minister Tusk announced this investigation. So I think the Deputy Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, was pretty deftly sidestepping much of the question, citing the freshness of the announcement. However, this is also Poland, right? This is a staunch ally of the United States, 250 years of relations, a top spender for NATO, by the side of the United States in most of the battles it's fought in the past 40 years, now wading into a radioactive issue for this White House. And there's a legitimate reason for Poland to be looking into it. As he said, there are Polish citizens that appear to have been victims of Epstein. There may have been Polish citizens involved in Epstein's organization. But if they do uncover credible links between Russian intelligence services and Epstein, that's a whole new layer of complexity to throw on this very fraught situation at a time when most alliances with European allies between the United States, including with Poland, are pretty strained.
Fraught complexity. Another word for that is can of worms.
Yes.
Olivia Gazis, really great stuff. Thank you so very much. Still to come on The Takeout, former New Jersey Governor Christie, his defense of legalized online sports gambling ahead of the Super Bowl and his warning about predictive markets. Also, brand new CBS polling. How brand new? I mean, like just released moments ago about how Americans view economic opportunity right now. Our executive director of elections and surveys, Anthony Salvanto, of course, will join us live. And the Wall Street Journal report on a $500 million investment from an Abu Dhabi royal into the Trump family cryptocurrency venture. It happened days before President Trump's second inauguration, and why Democrats and even a couple of Republicans are raising some pretty significant ethical questions and concerns about all of that. We'll have that story, and The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Footnote in American gambling history, former New Jersey Governor Christie was one of legalized online sports gambling's staunchest and most consistent advocates. But ahead of this Sunday Super Bowl, I'm sure you've read about it, heard something about it, it's in the papers. He's concerned that progress, which he has achieved, might have gone a bit too far. Here's my conversation with him on that and a few other items we would classify as news of the day. Governor, let me read to you this lead I came across from Bloomberg this week. From Super Bowl prop bets to political forecasts, prediction markets are having a breakout moment. Once a niche corner of online betting, they are now drawing record volumes and blurring the line between sports fandom, finance, and forecasting. You're not a big fan, though, are you?
I am not a big fan, Major, because it's illegal. And let me tell you why. You know, we fought hard for 6 years when I was governor to get gambling at the state, sports gambling at the state level legalized. And now 40 states have set up regulatory schemes. They've set up taxing. They've set up integrity issues, both to protect the consumer and the integrity of the games. They don't market to teenagers. We set up this entire scheme across 40 different states. And these markets have now come in and said, we don't care about your laws. We're not going to comply with them. They don't apply to us because we're not bets. Well, go on the prediction markets and tell me, you look at the website. If it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And so they're absolutely, flouting the law. Bad for consumers, bad for the sports, and bad for the individual states.
And you're not a disinterested party. You're a strategic advisor to the American Gaming Association, so you have a point of view on this. What are you trying to protect, and what do you believe prediction markets are threatening?
Everything that I worked for 6 years as governor, which was to show the public that you could do sports gambling in a smart, responsible, legal way if it was run and regulated by the states. And that's what I'm standing up for. Yeah, I advised the AGA, proud to do it, but I advised them on this issue alone. And the reason I agreed to do it was because I believe so much in the fact that we got to protect teenagers from being marketed to by these prediction markets. We've got to make sure that we don't have them having folks with inside information that could, in fact, affect the integrity of the games that everyone's betting on. You know, we set this up in a very careful way. That's what we told the courts we would do if we did this. And now these guys are like rogue cowboys, Major, coming in and saying the laws don't apply to us. And I think they want to kind of become a fait accompli. Like, we're here, so what are you going to do with us now? And I don't want to get rid of them, Major. If they want to do sports bets, just come and get licensed and regulated in the states.
Super Bowl Sunday will be a bonanza of online betting. I want to read to you something this week that the NFL Executive Vice President Jeff Miller said when asked about prediction markets. It's innovative. That marketplace is dynamic. There's no question we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about this in the coming months. The only reason I highlight that to you, Governor, is that contrasts with what the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said earlier this year, which was much more cautious, much more brand protective about the NFL and being hesitant to embrace this new thing. You just said fait accompli. Does Jeff Miller's comments suggest to you that they're moving in that direction?
Well, it might, unless you didn't hear what the commissioner said about predictive market advertising in the Super Bowl,
right,
which it is prohibited.
Right.
Right.
Which is a different thing.
That's right. So I don't think the big boss is yet sold on this issue.
Are you nervous, though?
Well, I'm always nervous, Major. I'm always a nervous guy wanting to protect something that means a lot to me. So, look, the NHL has already decided to embrace and have one of the predictive market companies as a sponsor. I get that. But the fact is, I don't care if they do all that. Just comply with state law. Don't pretend that it's not a bet. It's a bet. And if it's a bet and you're offering it in New Jersey, New York, Illinois, wherever you want to mention of the 40 states that now authorize it, well, then just comply with the laws of those states. And by the way, there are 10 states who don't want sports betting. And guess what the predictive market companies are doing? Offering sports betting in those states. So in Alabama, in Texas, in Georgia, where they've affirmatively decided, the voters have decided they don't want sports gambling in their state. Predictive markets say, we don't care. We're offering it anyway.
Governor, since I have you here, I'd like to ask you about a couple of other news of the day items. there's more and more polling data. We have some, Fox has some, NPR has some this week, all suggesting something I think you would agree inconceivable a year ago. Immigration has become problematic politically for this White House.
It's absolutely right. And this is what happens when you screw up the execution, Major. Listen, people voted for one thing very clearly when we regarded Donald Trump on immigration. They wanted the border closed and criminals to be removed from the country. They did not vote for what we're seeing in Minneapolis and in many other places around this country. And it's not just what they're doing, but it is also the way they're doing it. And the American people are uncomfortable with it. And the president has taken what has been a plus 30 issue for the Republican Party over the last number of years and has turned it into a negative issue.
What do you think he should do or say that he hasn't yet done or said?
He needs to go back to his original talking points from the campaign, which was, we're going to close the border, which he has effectively done, and we are going to go after the worst of the worst. Remember? That's what he used to say during the campaign at those rallies. We're going to go after the worst of the worst, the murderers and the rapists who are in this country illegally. If he goes back to that pinpointed removal of bad actors, criminals who have committed violent crime in this country, I think he'll go back to have it being a positive for him and for the Republican Party. But he seems to be unwilling to do it because when you take Christie Noem and say she's no longer in charge, but you put Tom Homan in charge, that's just an optical change because Tom Homan has been the architect of this policy with the president from the beginning.
Very quickly, on the president continuing to say this week we should nationalize the midterm elections, even though his press secretary keeps saying that's not exactly what he means.
Look, he said something else. He said the states are agents of the federal government. As a former governor, I protest. That's not what the way the founders set this up. We're not agents of the federal government. We are independent political actors inside a country. And we are the ones who the Constitution, under Article 1, Section 4, gives the right to run elections to. And so the president should give this one up. It's not a winner, and it makes him sound a little bit loony, to tell you the truth.
Former New Jersey Governor Christie, always a pleasure. Hope to talk to you again, sir.
Absolutely, Major. Great to talk to you.
Next, our one and only Anthony Salvanto and brand new CBS News polling. You see him at the big board, big smile on his face, on economic opportunity, how close it is or isn't, and perceptions thereof. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. As promised, brand new CBS News polling on how Americans feel about the economy, but not in that general sense, with some really interesting specific questions. Joining me now, your friend of mine, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, I apologize. We're a little pressed for time. Two things you came across. Who is economic opportunity available to? And how secure do you feel in your job?
Okay.
Those are really good questions.
Okay. So here we go, Major. We talk about the economy because people talk about the economy. Always a number one issue. Look, ratings are low, have been low. But these big picture items that you just mentioned, what does it mean for opportunity? Take a look. This are the percents of people saying it is harder today than for previous generations in their mind to buy a home, to raise a family, to get a good job. Big things, big parts of economic opportunity. And take a look at this, the disparity between what they see as wealthy people and the middle class. Majority saying they think increasing opportunities for the wealthy, but a slight majority say decreasing opportunities for the middle class. That's what those numbers translate to, bigger picture, Major.
And what about how secure do you feel currently with your job?
Okay, jobs reports coming out. This is what people think. Is there security for those who are employed? Do they feel it? Yes, most do, but not as much. Fewer now say that they feel very secure in their job if they have one. More say somewhat secure, and there's a little more who say, there's a lot more, in fact, who say that if they had to go find a job, they think it would be difficult to find. That's that uncertainty in the job market, Major.
Anthony Salvanto and his team always ask really great probing questions that get to deeper feelings about topics. All that data you can find on CBSNews.com. Anthony, we're pressed for time, but I appreciate what you gave us. Thank you so very much. Top Democrat on Capitol Hill is investigating an Abu Dhabi Royals $500 million investment into a Trump-tied cryptocurrency company. The Wall Street Journal's Sam Kessler and many other reporters there broke that story, and he joins me next. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. There are times when I see a lead of a news story that is so startling to me, I have to read it out loud. I did that earlier this week when I came across this piece in the Wall Street Journal. It's going to take a second, so bear with me. Quote, 4 days before Donald Trump's inauguration last year, lieutenants to an Abu Dhabi royal secretly signed a deal with the Trump family to purchase a 49% stake in their fledgling cryptocurrency venture for $500 million, unquote. The piece goes on to say this, quote, the deal marks something unprecedented in American politics, a foreign governmental official taking a major ownership stake in an incoming U.S. president's company, unquote. One of the reporters who broke this story joins me now. Sam Kessler, welcome to The Takeout. It's great to have you here. Who is at the center of this story from the United Arab Emirates? And how close is this person to those in the Trump inner circle?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And that was a great overview. The person at the center of this deal on the UAE side was actually pictured just a moment ago, Sheikh Tahnoon. He's often referred to, we say this in our story, as the spy sheikh. So he's the head of the UAE's security agencies. He's their spy chief. He's also brother to the president of the UAE. And he was on the other side of this deal, along with a couple of other co-investors. Like you mentioned, it was a $500 million deal for 49% of the president's cryptocurrency firm. And what's really striking about this deal was just the timing of it. So Sheikh Tahnoon, in addition to those roles that I mentioned before, is also he's been tasked with overseeing a vast fortune of companies worth 1.4 or 1.3 now trillion dollars. One of those companies is an AI firm called G42. And like I mentioned, the timing is interesting because after this deal with World Liberty Financial was signed, where Tahnoon's investors took 49% of the firm, after the president was inaugurated just a few months later, the U.S. allowed the UAE, and in particular, one of Tahnoon's companies, that G42 firm I mentioned, access to these really sophisticated NVIDIA AI chips that they'd been blocked from accessing under the Biden administration. So it's a really significant timeline.
And the reason they were blocked from that access was concerns about those chips and that technology possibly finding its way to China.
Absolutely. So the Biden administration was concerned that specifically this company, even G42, had links to Chinese tech giants like Huawei. And G42 and Tahnoon's broader empire have said that they've broken those ties, and this was prior to Trump making this deal or changing this policy such that UAE would get access to these chips. But it really is significant. This deal was blocked in previous administrations, or wouldn't have happened in previous administrations, it would seem, due to these national security concerns.
And this was not disclosed, the transaction with World Liberty Financial. You were able to find out about it, and there are parts of World Liberty Financial and other entities that have the same members on the board of directors also not disclosed, if I have it correct.
Yeah, that's one of the really extraordinary things about this, the secrecy of it. So the president has done, or rather his broader business empire has done, a lot of deals while he's been in office. And most of those deals, we know about them. There's been some level of transparency. This is really extraordinary because we haven't known about it. And it's not certain that we would have ever known about it if not for this reporting. It's been over a year. And you mentioned that there's certain people who are, I guess, significant to this reporting. You had two board members who are on the board of G42 and another Tahnoon company that has done business with World Liberty Financial, MGX. They both joined World Liberty's board as a part of this deal. They also signed on behalf of this group of investors that purchased that 49% stake as part of this World Liberty deal. And they were also involved in negotiations and lobbying efforts pushing for these chips. One of them, so they're both on G42, like I mentioned. One of them is actually the CEO of G42, that firm I mentioned that got those sophisticated AI chips.
So there are connections, there is a change in policy, and there's a transaction. Historically, that would be a massive scandal.
We mentioned in the piece that this is really unprecedented. The way that we frame it in the article is that it is an unprecedented instance of a foreign government official taking a direct stake in a U.S. president's company, and it really is a pretty, I think, rare sort of glimpse, or it really is a rare happening, I guess, in modern, or at least I think just in all of American history. We haven't really seen anything like this.
Many in my audience hear the name Steve Witkoff understandably invoked because he's the president's designated top envoy. He travels extensively throughout the region. He's a part of this story, too.
Yeah, so Steve Witkoff is actually a co-founder of World Liberty Financial. At the time that this deal was signed with World Liberty Financial and Sheikh Tahnoon, he had already been named as the incoming envoy to the Middle East under the president. He was also, I mean, he's been involved in deal making across the region. He is not just, envoy is a sort of vague term, but he really has been at the center of a lot of deals, from Gaza peace to, of course, policy affecting the Gulf and the UAE.
Sam Kessler said this was secret until it wasn't, and it wasn't because of intrepid reporting by he and his team at the Wall Street Journal. Sam, I appreciate you coming on the show very much to help us understand this a bit better. Next, my conversation with the author of the new book on the rise of former Majority Leader Harry Reid. That's coming up next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. A new book by renowned Nevada political journalist John Ralston looks at the rise and ascendancy within Washington of the late Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and the historic record he left behind in that chamber and on national politics, for good and maybe sometimes for ill. The book's title, The Game Changer: How Harry Reid Remade the Rules and Showed Democrats How to Fight. Here is part of my conversation with the author. John, first question. The topic of this book is Harry Reid. Did Harry Reid hate you?
I don't know if Harry Reid hated anybody. He had a lot of disdain for people, but hate, I don't know. He always said there was a mutual respect and that he only got mad at me because I wrote about his family or attacked his family, which what he meant by that, Major, was that I'd written columns saying that he used his influence to help members of his family accomplish certain things, which shockingly I thought was a story, and he didn't. And I think it was much more about Landra Reid, his wife, who was very protective of the family, even more so than Harry Reid. And so did Landra Reid hate me at one time? That I can't speak to.
He did try to get you fired.
He succeeded eventually. He tried to get me fired several times from a TV station job that I had, which the irony of this, Major, is that his good friend Jim Rogers, a media mogul who owned a bunch of stations in the Southwest, owned that station, hired me, and then when Reid got mad at me, he went to Rogers to get me fired. Rogers actually fired me for an afternoon before I persuaded him to let me back on the air before the show aired. But then after Rogers passed away and Sinclair purchased the station and had their license there pending, Reid went to them and said, get rid of this guy. And I found emails that show that they felt the pressure.
And yet this book exists with access that no one else has had to Harry Reid's private papers because Harry Reid said, you're the one who should write it. I don't understand that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. I lobbied people close to Reid for years. And I mean, maybe more than a decade, Major, to let me do this book. You covered politics in Nevada. You know this. Reid is the most fascinating guy ever to be in Nevada politics in the modern era. And so I wanted to write the definitive biography. And as people kept giving me the stiff arm, he and I had, as you already alluded to, a roller coaster of our relationships. Finally, after he was out of office in 2021, when he went to work for the biggest casino company, that's how these things work, yes, in Nevada, at MGM, and he had an office in the Bellagio on the Strip, and he summoned me there and said, I've decided to let you do the book. You and I have something in common. We're both survivors. And I holstered my usual instinct to retort, no thanks to you am I a survivor, sir, because I wanted the contract to do the book. And so he said, I know I'm not going to like everything in the book, but you're the guy to tell the story, and so let's get started.
Did that create for you at any level an emotional conflict?
Because he had tried to get me fired?
Yes.
No, you know.
And because of your tangles, and not only trying to get you fired, but you guys would spar on the phone, and not happily so.
Yeah, and even on my show, when he did come on, we sparred. I think I was so eager to write the book, Major, that I was able to do what Harry Reid was sometimes able to do, which was think, in the Godfather movie's words, not personal, just business. Yeah. And I knew that's how Reid thought about it. And he had made several kind of overtures to me during the years to make it clear that he didn't care what I wrote about him. It was about his kids. And it clear to me from people near him that it was Landra driving that whole thing. But, you know, I wanted to do the book. I thought he was a fascinating guy to write about, and I didn't even know the half of it when I started.
So just picturing this in my mind, it feels almost cinematic, summoning you to the Bellagio. I'm gathering it was not a small ante-room. It was a rather large office, some of the grandeur of politics accumulated in a life at the highest levels. Did you feel at any time in that conversation that he was bestowing this upon you and therefore you owed him something in return?
He never really behaved that way, although I like you using the word cinematic. Let's hope there's a movie in this at some point, Major. I have to.
I'm totally available.
Yes, there is a role. I have to tell you, he never really behaved that way. The way that Harry Reid was, you've read the story, maybe you've even experienced the hang-ups, that Reid would just hang up on people. After he had the initial conversation out of the way and we were going to do it, it was just on to business and how are we going to do this and when can we start? Yeah, what are the logistics? I said, well, sorry, I do need to get a publisher. I'm not doing this on spec. And then he, mentioned that, do we need a contract on this? And I said, I don't think so, but he never asked for any preconditions, never said anything like that.
In 21st century politics in America, Harry Reid matters. Why?
Well, he matters because he became the most powerful Democrat on Capitol Hill, as you well know. And he matters because of all that he accomplished nationally. I don't think Obamacare would have passed without Harry Reid doing what he did and some other major legislation. But he also matters, Major, and he was not really that forthcoming about this part of it. He was part of why the Senate started to go downhill, I think, and the dysfunction, because he was willing to say anything at any time, not just in a press conference, not just in the stakeout but on the Senate floor.
But on the Senate floor.
And he did.
Where historically there had been guardrails about what you did or didn't do.
And I think that this is one of the, I talk about the duality of Harry Reid in the book, and there's a lot to talk about there. But this great institutionalist who knew the Senate rules and decorum better than anybody was willing to break it if it was going to help him get to an end goal, whether it was tarring Mitt Romney as not paying taxes or attacking the Koch brothers, which he also did on the Senate floor, as you know. So, but listen, he mattered. He got a lot done, and he mattered in Nevada. I make the argument in the book that he's the most powerful elected official in Nevada history, and there's a few competitors maybe, but he did more for the state than anyone has ever done.
You can catch my full conversation with John Ralston on your favorite podcast platform. Happy Thursday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is coming up next.